Sarah Pearson was known around the neighborhood as the prickly widow. With her graying hair pulled into a tight bun, she walked her small dog, Chester, down the same streets every morning. She was meticulous, always picking up every stray leaf or piece of trash that crossed her path. Children whispered that she had a heart as cold as the winter wind, and adults smiled politely but kept their distance. One warm autumn morning, a young woman named Emily moved into the condo across from Sarah's. Emily was vibrant, with a knack for gardening, and she quickly filled her small porch with pots of colorful flowers. She greeted everyone with a bright smile, including Sarah, who responded with a curt nod before continuing on her way. One afternoon, Emily was tending to her plants when Sarah came outside with Chester. "Hello, Mrs. Pearson," Emily called out cheerfully, hoping to spark a conversation. Sarah glanced at her, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Good afternoon," she replied stiffly, and then continued walking. Emily watched her retreating figure, a bit disheartened but determined not to give up. Over the following weeks, she made small efforts to engage with Sarah, offering her fresh herbs, complimenting her on her neat garden, even baking cookies and leaving them at her door. Each time, Sarah's responses were brief, polite, but distant. Despite her best efforts, Emily began to share in the neighborhood's consensus. Sarah Pearson was a difficult woman to get close to. One chilly evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the streetlights flickered on, Emily was walking back home from a late shift at the cafe. The streets were nearly empty, the air crisp with the promise of winter. As she turned the corner to her street, she saw Sarah sitting on the front steps of her condo, her usual composure gone. Chester was curled up next to her, but Sarah seemed oblivious to everything around her. Emily hesitated for a moment, then slowly approached. "Mrs. Pearson?" she called softly. Sarah looked up, and to Emily's surprise, her eyes were red and puffy. Without waiting for a response, Emily sat down beside her, the silence between them heavy. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then, Sarah broke the silence, her voice barely a whisper. Today would have been my daughter's 35th birthday." Emily turned to her, shocked. She had never heard anyone mention Sarah having a daughter. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Pearson," she said gently. Sarah stared into the distance, her voice trembling. "She was so full of life, just like you. Loved to garden, always had a smile for everyone." Her hands shook as she spoke, and she clasped them tightly together. "But I lost her. It was a car accident. She was just 20 when it happened. Ever since then, I just couldn't bear to get close to anyone. The pain, it's too much." Emily felt tears prickling at her own eyes as she listened. "That must be incredibly hard. I had no idea." Sarah let out a shaky breath. "No one does. I keep to myself because it's easier that way. People don't understand. They just see a bitter old woman, and I suppose that's what I've become." Emily reached out and placed a hand on Sarah's arm. "You're not just that. You're someone who's been through something unimaginable. But you're not alone. We're all here, and we care." Sarah looked at Emily, her eyes softening for the first time. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for not giving up on me." From that day on, Emily and Sarah began to spend more time together. Emily would bring over fresh flowers, and Sarah would share stories about her daughter, stories she had kept locked away for years. The walls Sarah had built around herself began to crumble, revealing a woman who had loved deeply and lost tragically, but who still had so much to give. The neighborhood began to notice the change. Sarah was still meticulous, still preferred her routines, but there was warmth in her eyes now, a smile that hadn't been seen in years. People began to greet her with genuine kindness, no longer seeing just the prickly widow, but the person she truly was. One day, as Sarah and Emily were sitting on Sarah's porch, surrounded by the vibrant flowers Emily had planted, Sarah turned to her and said, "You know, I think my daughter would have liked you." Emily smiled, her heart full. "I think I would have liked her too." And in that moment, under the golden light of a setting sun, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of peace. Moral lesson. Everyone carries burdens and stories that we may never see or understand at first glance. Judging others based on what they show on the surface can blind us to the truth of who they really are. It's only when we take the time to truly know someone that we uncover the beauty and pain that shape them, and in that understanding, we find connection and compassion.